Welcome to HortTube. My name is Jim Putnam. In this video, we're going to bounce around at Superior Plants, my buddy Jason Stevens' nursery, and show off a few interesting things he has going on in the greenhouse. I did a similar video to this one you may have seen last week. If you're interested, he grows a lot of really kind of interesting plants, and a lot of the plants that you see in our garden came from him. One place that you could buy from him is this is a wholesale nursery, but he does a couple of retail events during the year. And you can look on the Pine Knot website, the Hellebore Nursery. He goes and sells his things at their open house in late February into early March. So look that up if you're interested in any of these plants. I'm sure he'll be carting some of these things up there for that Pine Knot sale, which is on the North Carolina-Virginia border. Let's jump into some cool plants, okay? He's got lots of cast iron plants of various stripes and spotted cast iron plants all over the greenhouse. I think he's calling this one Super Stripes right here. Look at that thing. Look how beautiful that is. The plant directly behind it, this is an interesting one to me. This is an orange flowering osmanthus, and it's called Apricot Echo. We have this one in the garden at the house, and we've had to prune it and prune it and prune it. The thing just stretches and stretches and stretches. And what I've come to learn for this plant is it's just has two different lives. When it's young like this is how this thing grows. It grows as this kind of rangy, look at this. That's in a 1 gallon container. It's 5 feet tall. This thing is the rangiest plant I've ever seen. So if you saw this at retail, what would you think of this? You would go, no, that's not a good ornamental plant, right? But the one at the Ralston, which is never pruned, never hacked on, never messed with, is the most compact, full plant you'll ever see. It's 15 feet tall, something like that. And it's a perfect compact plant with lots of these orange, fragrant flowers on it. So I'm just curious about this plant. It's been the same in our garden. As a young plant, it's just super rangy and grows literally feet a week, it feels like, during the growing season. But then it actually becomes a great ornamental plant. So don't pass this one up if you see it in the trade, because it's a perfect, really great screening plant. He does a lot of Edgeworthia, roots a lot of Edgeworthia, and I used to get Edgeworthia from Jason when I had my nursery. I'd get rooted cuttings from him. And this is another plant that's kind of interesting, because Edgeworthia on its own, given space, really becomes quite a great ornamental plant, where it tends to be 4 feet wide by 4 feet tall, or 5 feet wide by 5 feet tall, and just kind of grows very, very uniform. When you grow them from rooted cuttings, initially sometimes they can be a bit rangy, like this one looks right now, but it will become kind of a formal looking growth habit in time. They're budded up, pretty typical of what we'd see with Edgeworthia here. This time of year, they'll open up earlier than most other plants in the garden. There are different color flowers on these that are available, but the flowers point down, they're nodding. So you have to kind of, this is another good one to put up on a bank or a slope, or put it in a place where you can allow it to get tall, because it will become quite tall in time, and then you'll be able to see the flowers at that point. But when it's this tall and there's 4 flowers on it, it gets, you can't really see them all that well, but you're going to smell them from a mile away. That's the thing that's incredibly fragrant plant. There's a variegated osmanthus back here, and I don't know if these have any flowers on. Yeah, they do. They have some flowers on them right now as well. They've been grown a little close together, so they got a little bit of a disease issue along the flowers. But look at the variegation on this osmanthus. Once it's out in some open space, won't have any of these foliage issues on it. But they're flowering along the stems. They're in a house here, which is probably keeping it about 5 or 10 degrees warmer during the nighttime temperature, so they're continuing to bloom. These types of osmanthus bloom in all the months with the R's in them. Okay, so it's like some sort of seafood rules as well. The months with the R's in them, when you're going to see the flowers on the osmanthus, typically September, October, November is when you're going to get most of the flowers, but they'll continue to throw flowers out, through the entire winter, which are also extremely fragrant. This is a distylium hybrid called Bayou Bliss, and it's in the Southern Living Plant Collection. It's one of Buddy Lee's introductions, and as Buddy always does, he knocks it out of the park. The one thing about distylium is nobody knew what a distylium was 20 years ago or more, and then now they're just everywhere. There's not a landscape job that goes in our neighborhood in Raleigh that doesn't have the landscapers not using distylium on them, because they're great evergreen shrubs, and they're in all different shapes and sizes. Some of them are vigorously upright growing, some of them are really vigorously wide, but I think Buddy really got a super unique one here. This one's been in our garden for 3 or 4 years, and it's only a foot in height and maybe 3 feet in width at this point. The other thing that's interesting, and unfortunately this is in the witch hazel family, and as we know with anything in the witch hazel family, as soon as it gets warm at all, if they experience any cold followed by any warmth, they'll bloom. And so these have already bloomed out. Typically they'll bloom more like February in our garden, but this is one of the more floriferous distylium that I've seen. Typically they have those witch hazel like frilly flowers on them, just like loropetalum and any other things in the witch hazel family, but on the distylium, they bloom really close to the leaves along this rib, basically, and they're inconspicuous. They're not showy, but this one has really great red flowers on it. And trust me, like 2 weeks ago, this was pretty super showy in here. But I really like this plant. I think this is one of the great zone 7 to 9 leafy evergreens. In zone 7, you want to give it a little winter protection. They're not the most cold tolerant thing in the world. So in zone 7 protected, in zone 8 and 9 a little more in open space. But if you're looking for a low growing, spreading, ornamental, again, I think Buddy really knocked it out of the ballpark. This distylium is just truly different. There's so many others on the market that I think all kind of look the same, but this one is very unique and again more floriferous. This is an interesting Nellie Stevens holly that has gold foliage called Whoa Nellie, which is an interesting name. Gets big, gets 15 feet plus and 10 feet wide, just like regular Nellie Stevens hollies. Of course, this one's in a little 1-gallon pot. It's a newly rooted plant. It is about to flower. It's self-fruiting, so it'll get the red berries on them, just like you would expect from other Nellie Stevens hollies. The variegation's a little all over the place on this. Some of them have just the yellow on the end of the leaf right there. Some will be solid yellow leaves. Some, it doesn't, in the older foliage, it doesn't show up quite as well, but it is an interesting plant. Definitely, I think the more sun, the more color you're gonna get on it, but it's an interesting gold foliage, wide leaf, evergreen holly. When I said the osmanthus up there have really insignificant little white flowers or orange flowers on them, I was not talking about fuddingzu. This particular variety actually is very showy when it flowers, and this is only a 8-inch, 10-inch plant here. And you can see how many flowers are on it. As it gets bigger, the flowers are more pronounced and super, super showy. So of all the osmanthus varieties out there, I think this one's the one that's like, actually has stop you in your tracks white flowers. They're all fragrant and you can smell them from a mile away, but this one's actually quite showy as well. We really abused ours. We left it in a container too long. We moved it like 3 times. It's finally in its permanent home. And toward the end of the season, it actually started to look a little better. So I think ours will be filled in and looking pretty good in the future. But we had one for like 3 years and we moved it all over the place. We didn't really give the poor thing a chance to get going. But if you run up on this fuddingzu osmanthus, this one's definitely one to grab because it not only has the fragrant flowers, but it also has showy flowers. Jason grows a lot of camellias and a lot of interesting ones, but this one's one that's been around for a long, long time called Shishi Gashera. And the reason he'd be growing this one is because this one requires some patience. You really have to be patient to grow this plant. From a rooted cutting to these 3 gallons, these are newly potted 3 gallons, so these were large 1 gallons that just got potted into these 3 gallons. But to grow a 3-gallon plant from a rooted cutting can take 3 full years of patience. It's one of the great varieties. It's got that kind of semi-double pink flower. It still shows the middle flower part, so the pollinators, you'll still have the pollinators on it this time of year. Has kind of a weeping habit, and it's always been considered kind of one of the smaller growing camellias, but we were down at Bobby Green's house, and he has some that were planted like decades and decades and decades ago, and they're 20-some feet tall. It was kind of wild to see this plant. Again, these plants don't read the plant tags. So this is another plant you're going to buy, and the plant tag's going to say it gets 3 to 4 feet in height. It's maintainable at 3 to 4 feet in height, but ultimately will get bigger. I will say though that Bobby's done some breeding on these, and so we have white shishi in the garden, and we have light pink shishi. Those do definitely have more of an initial weeping habit on them, so I think they're going to be much easier to keep smaller in time in the garden. But don't let that bother you with this plant. Shishi Gashera, which is what this one is, white shishi or light pink shishi, any of them are great additions to the garden, great evergreen plants. And here we are between Christmas and New Year's with this thing in flower. There's some Yuletide, a few Yuletide camellias in here. Yuletide has that single red, great name, Yuletide. Here we are, it's Christmas week as I'm filming this, and you know, what could be more Christmassy than that bright red Camellia sasanqua flower. And again, it's got all the flower parts exposed. So we were over at a park in Raleigh just yesterday, wandering around, and it happened to be a 60-degree day, so all the bees were out, and they were flocking to these camellias. This is a rare little dwarf, a Ligustrum japonicum called Little Moon, and rare because it's going to be kind of pretty slow in comparison to other Ligustrum. So this is one to be on the lookout for. If you're looking for something super kind of gnarly and weird looking for a container or a small space in an Asian garden, or an interesting space you have around a patio or something, this is a cool plant. I'm going to end this video where I started the first tour video on Ralston's hardy dwarf viburnum. Here's some 3-gallon ones and what I showed the other day in the other video with some rooted cuttings Jason is working on. But you see this tag that says choice plants. This is some tags that the J.C. Ralston Arboretum has for some of the interesting plants that that are over at the Ralston, and some of the growers here in the Johnston County Nurserymen Association. When one of these gets sold that has these choice plant tags on them, some of the money goes back to the Ralston. So if you see that plant tag, you know that you're getting a plant that's been time tested in the ground at the J.C. Ralston Arboretum, you know, for the Southeast United States, and you're also, you know, donating something back to the Ralston potentially as well. Serendipity, Magnolia, which there are a few back here behind me, was also in that first video that I talked about as well. It's another one of those. But if you see that plant tag somewhere, know that some of that money's going to a good cause. You know, what the Ralston really is over there is a place where plants really get trialed in kind of the way in which plants should be trialed, which is kind of a slight, you know, they're not being over irrigated, they're not being manicured, they're not being worked on constantly. They're actually being evaluated for, can you plant it in the ground and leave it alone and have it perform well in our area of Raleigh, North Carolina, which probably translates to a lot of the Southeast United States. But anyway, this is that Ralston's hardy viburnum, which I bring up quite a bit. It's a dwarf version of our native viburnum. And on the topic of J.C. Ralston Arboretum, our open garden is going to be in, I think, June 20th and June 21st. It's about the same exact timing that we had last year. We had about 800 people, we think, over the 2 days show up to the garden, and it was a wonderful event. We had lots of giveaways. Companies sent us things to give away, so we gave away Encore Azaleas and things from the Southern Living Plant Collection, and lots of other companies were involved in that as well, Soil3 and more. So thank you, and hopefully they'll contribute again. So we'll have giveaways, we'll be selling t-shirts. Hopefully the dogs will be involved. Holly's almost 16, so hopefully she hangs in there for another open garden and people can see her at the open garden. I have no idea. I know that's probably just bad to say in a video. It's supposed to be uplifting gardening videos, right? But so the tickets are now available. It's going to be ticketed this year. We had so many people last year. We wanted to kind of reduce the numbers just a bit. So it is, you do pay to come, but part of the money is going to the J.C. Ralston Arboretum and to the gardens of southeastern North Carolina. That's, if you go over to the store front on my HortTube.com website, you can see the description. You can either come Friday evening, Saturday morning, or Saturday afternoon. And again, part of the money is going to be donated. We're not trying to make this a big profit center, but we are trying to make sure that we control the crowd just a bit more than we did last year. Hopefully it won't be 100 degrees like it was last year. But anyway, if you're considering coming this year, I might get the ticket earlier than later. Kids 12 and under are free, so you don't have to buy a ticket for them. But the tickets, again, they're over on the website, and we're going to be donating part of the money to some gardens that trial plants for us and help us, find great ornamental plants. Thanks for watching.